exercise is a little bit hard and challenging. It's a bridge style exercise. So if you don't mind demonstrating a bridge for me, lower body and upper body nice, level and flat. You're not overextending if you don't mind demonstrating that. Where you could be creating issues in the low back, and you're not underextending where you're not really challenging it, which will kind of challenge the legs more so. That'll challenge the butt well. Hopefully you don't get mad at me for saying that, as well as like the low back and everything else. It'll stabilize you well. From here, if you really want to get challenging, because this seems a little too easy for you, we will do a one leg, right? And ideally you want to keep your hips nice and level like she is. And you can tell that she works out all the time, because most people that do this, the leg will drop just a little bit. The hip will drop. Can you demonstrate that? Yeah, like how the hip kind of drops, and you've seen that 100 times, I'm sure, while you're training people. And that challenges it a lot better. It doesn't create muscular imbalances. And I would rather you do it, 10 seconds correctly than 30 seconds incorrectly. You can relax. Because when you start to do it incorrectly, you start to create improper muscle balances, and it will create all kinds of issues later on. We're gonna move into a plank. These are great for pelvic stabilization as well as any core stabilization. And you got a nice plank here. And what you want is you want your back to be flat. If you don't mind arching, we don't want you to do an arch or anything like that. We also don't want you to drop way down into it and be there, because that's going to create muscular imbalances, especially people with anterior or posterior pelvic tilts. This exercise really helps with that, unless you're doing it incorrectly. All right, so if you don't mind lying back, we're going to show a lower abdomen exercise. It's like 6 inches, yep, right like that. If you don't mind, and you can keep your head down if you're having too much pressure already. By sitting at a computer or whatever else, but this will really work the lower ab. Great for pelvic tilt issues, whether it's anterior or posterior. And I'll just keep talking to see how long she can do this. I'm only teasing you, but that's exactly what you want to do. You want your feet to be steady. All right, so the next stretch we're going to do is just kind of a crossover body stretch. It's a great lower back stretch. If you don't mind getting on the floor for me. You're going to kind of start with your arms straight out, laying flat, and then you're going to take your left leg, perfect, and bring it over. And you should get a nice stretch through here, through that low back. Did you feel that down there?
Yes.
Okay, good. And then try the other side. And what's funny about this is anybody that does it will almost always have one side that's a little more flexible. That side seems a little bit more flexible to you, right? It's not stretching quite as much. And that's totally normal. It has to do with everything that we do on a daily basis, whether it's you turn slightly looking at your computer, or the way that you lean when you're driving, or whatever it is, and that's okay. Just means that you may need to focus on the other side a little bit more. Okay, so again, we're going to do another stretch for the low back. This one you may do at work, you may not. It's similar to the tree pose in yoga. What you're going to do is you bring your arms up. I won't demonstrate this because I don't want to show off my midriff, and get a nice stretch through the side and everything else. And you can feel that a bit in your obliques, you can feel it a bit in your back and everything, correct? Good, and then you come to the other side. And again, a lot of people will find when they go to do these that they feel tighter on one side versus the other. And again, that has to do with activities of daily living, and that's exactly why we're doing that, is we want the balance on both sides. So again, if you notice that one side's a little harder to do, don't try to compensate and make it as far. Try to do it for longer so that it will start to stretch out and do that normally, being more balanced. All right, so the next stretch that we're going to do is for tight hip flexors. When you're seated at a desk all day, every day, your hip flexors become tight. Psoas and a bunch of other ones as well, rectus femoris. And so a lot of times you get tightness behind the knee as well as tightness in the hips. The one that we're going to focus on right now is for the hips. We're going to do a stretch called Warrior 2. It's a little similar from the yoga. If you don't mind demonstrating for me, you kind of start with your feet. I want them about double the width of your shoulder at 90 degrees. You're going to kind of lunge forward. You can turn your hips like that and keep your chest up. And you should feel a nice stretch through the front, correct? Okay, good. And then we always want to do both sides. And so you can see that her feet are at 90 degrees. You can see that her hips are turned forward, which is an important part, as well as your chest is up. And you bend to the front knee. And if you don't feel it enough, just lunge a little further and you'll feel it more. A lot of times you'll see people compensate. They start to get here and they're like, I don't feel it, because they're leaning over to compensate for psoas, because that goes all the way up to the low back, or they're getting low back pain when they do this. That means you do need to lean forward and compensate a little bit because you're jamming the low back too much, okay?